Good evening, lovers of literature. Today we will be dealing with a very different poem, but that will talk typically about our author's style. And the author we are going to deal today is none other than one of the greatest 19th century author who wrote on till the 20th century. And in his own words that he has said that the style of a writer should be a quality of writing that had to be perfected by each author individually. And he has done it with a perfect cadence and a perfect sensibility of his own. I hope you can just gather that who this 19th century writer or poet or essayist can be. It is none other than Mr. Thomas Hardy. He's one of my very personal favorite poets. Hardy, as we know, had a very pessimist view on life and love. He wrote in a variety of genres, from epic drama to cheerful ballads, and he used a meticulous description of events and characters that are not only limited to humans. It might got extended to nature, to animals, and of course he has also done it with sexual imagery. And the plot of his novels distinguish his modern style of writing. So Hardy is of course is a 20th century writer who just introduced the modern style of writing in English literature. And with this particular view of love, he obtained a poetry different from other poets of his period. The sadness of romantic love is one of his main themes. And you have to understand, his works are full of realism coupled with pessimism. He describes nature with its cruelties and difficulties, but never with a sentimental approach. And you have to understand another thing, that in terms of language, in terms of grammar, Hardy always used the subjunctive mood to hesitate or make assumptions. He used phrases that were quite outdated. Furthermore, his works contained long sentences, and sometimes he introduced his own words that are also known as nonce words. He used sometimes nouns in the position and function of adjectives and verbs. So that is his unique style of grammar. And in terms of poetry, he was inspired a lot in Elizabethan style of poetry. Hardy preferred poetry and he wrote verse throughout his life. Loneliness is introduced in all his poems, and in all his feelings they arise. His poetry is full of vitality, versatility, musicality, control of language, and poetic adaptation of old ways to new ways. All this must be added to the fact that death is very present in his poems, and also the poems about war. His poems are traditional in form and structure, but also in his themes, which is noted, are usually based on the everyday life. Hardy's poetry can be divided into three parts: war poems, poems about Emma, his first wife. He shows his loneliness out there in which he lived after the death of his wife. And another that is philosophical, personal, in poems on nature, which is full of reference to his wife Emma. So these are the three broad variety we can describe Hardy's poems to. And you have to understand one thing, that Hardy is of course a poet who wrote from the standpoint of Elizabethan poetry, but never to miss that he had his unique voice. He added to its own grammar, he added to his own shades in his own poetry. And that is how he worked so hard to carve this unique style of his. And if you see to the setting of Thomas Hardy's poems, the works of Thomas Hardy can be classified as belonging to the 20th century. It is so difficult to know how to define 20th century literature, as of course many writers were already producing work at the end of the 19th century and continued into the next one, as it is in the case of Hardy that I had already mentioned. Now the 20th century is marked by several movements, traditions. Came from France, that is the tradition of the Bohemian life. The growth of popular education caused by the Educational Act of 1870 brought the emergence of new journalisms. Pessimism, stoicism were cultivated at that time, and especially Hardy's novels and poetry show the pessimism of that period. So if you go into the setting, it's very important to know about the setting, because Mr. Hardy, if you have to understand the present poem that I have not yet mentioned, what are we going to discuss on? You have to understand the style, the persona, the setting that Mr. Hardy wrote from. In Thomas Hardy's poems, we find there is a kind of domination by the social classes. The Victorian laws about Christian faith and different ideologies of population about socialism were a great influence upon literature. Many intellectuals were concerned about that, and of course Mr. Hardy did do that. In Thomas Hardy's period, topics such as death, discouragement, regret, loneliness, loss were very much present. That time appeared a new movement called the movement of literary decadence. The Boer War, that was from 1899 to 1902, between the imperialist and anti-imperialist British, the Irish question or the World War, that is 1914 to 1918, caused a great influence among the writers of that century. The coming of the First World War also produced good poetry. There were some who saw the war in a romantic and sentimental light, like Rupert Brooke, and others who reflected the harsh reality, brutality, furtivity of war, as Wilfred Owen. An important movement of the century was the Imagist movement, which brought the usage of details and descriptions in order to create a sensory experience for the reader. Let me quote, Imagism went in for the short, sharply edged, descriptive lyric, but it had no technique for the production of longer and more complex poems. So you understand the psyche. It marked the 20th century poetry and the birth of modernism. The modernist movement was born between 1922 to 1925 It was the movement that appeared as an effect of the post-war depression, and also it's supposed to revolt against realism. So in the 1920s caused one of the greatest movements of literary development in history and ended in 1929 with the economic crisis and the continued depression. So this is the backdrop of the poems written by poets during that century and that era. So this background is very much needed to understand Hardy's poems. The poem that we are going to deal with today is The Darkling Thrush, published in 1912. It was written when the 19th century was coming to an end and a new era was going to set in. Hardy, as usual, employed his personal themes, that is depression, that is the kind of forlornness, this is the kind of loneliness that he always did in his poems. So this poem is quite the same. And it's a nature poem that has been cultivated through the mouthpiece of the poet trying to understand what makes the bird so happy that he can't get the trace of the happiness. It feels as if there is so much sadness in him which is trying to engulf him, whereas the small bird is so happy. What is the cause of its happiness, which the poet knows not? So this is what the main theme of our poem is. Now this bird, the thrush, bursts onto the scene, singing a beautiful and hopeful song to remember. So hopeful that the speaker wonders whether the bird knows something that the speaker doesn't. Like, what is that happiness? Maybe the speaker doesn't know that. Written in December 1900, published in 1912, the poem reflects on the end of the 19th century and the state of Western civilization. The desolation of the scene the speaker sees serves as an exalted or extended metaphor for the decay of Western civilization, while the thrush is a symbol for its possible rebirth through religious faith that was in decadence in him. So this thrush has so much to hold on to, which Mr. Hardy does not have any clue to. So the major theme that has been discussed in this poem is nature and decline of human civilization. The Darkling Thrush appears to be a poem about a winter landscape, which the speaker describes in considerable detail. On the symbolic level, however, this landscape is an extended metaphor for his sadness. Its bleakness, its decay, reflect the state of Western culture at the end of 19th century. The speaker describes Western culture in a state of desolation. It seems to be a damaged, dead environment without the possibility of rebirth or resurrection in a sense. The poem is both an elegy for and a rejection of that culture, providing a subtle critique of the way that the West has failed to take care of its own natural and cultural resources. In the first stanza, if you see, let me read out the first stanza. I leant upon a coppice gates, when frost was spectre grey, and winter's dregs made desolate the weakening eye of the day. So the poet paints a somber picture of the world. The mood feels lonely, meditative. The speaker watching is a silent bystander leaning upon the coppice gate, a gate that opens into the woods. In his loneliness, the poet has personified winter and frost. Frost is described as spectre grey, or a ghost-like or a ghastly grey. The winter's dregs of the fallen snow and the heavy fog are making the twilight or the dusk, though that is mentioned as weakening eye of the day, look desolate, empty. The winter and the frost are bleak company. They cannot arouse any sense of cheerfulness in the poet's heart. Now, if you look into this very, very minutely, you will see. Let me look into the poem. The poem begins with the speaker, as I've said, leaning against a coppice gate, the dregs, that is the end of winter's day. A coppice is a kind of a forest that foresters regularly cut back, chopping down trees and bushes in order to stimulate its growth. This detail will be important later in the stanza. Why? Because there he mentions this landscape is desolate. It provokes despair. For instance, the speaker uses a metaphor to compare the frost which has fallen on it to the spectre, a ghost, a spirit. Though the frost could easily be interpreted differently by someone with a different mindset, for instance, as a sign of Christmas cheer, but for Mr. Hardy is a metaphor for death. Similarly, the sun, the eye of the day in line 4, is weakening. The speaker does not mention that it will rise again. So what does he try to show us? That there is no hope for rebirth or resurrection. The prevailing mood is thus of decline and decay, without the possibility of renewal or resurrection. The lines also introduce a formal pattern, the poem structure, that will hold on for the rest of the poem. They're written in alternating lines of iambic, tetrameter, trimeter, and rhymed as AB, AB. It also has a regular pattern of enjambment, E-N-J-A-M-B-M-E-N-T. What is that? End stopped means the pattern will hold on through the poem's first two stanzas. The end of the second stanza, the speaker will never go more than 2 lines without an end stop. So if you see, I leant upon a coppice gate when frost was spectre grey, no end stop. And winter's dregs made desolate, and finally it stops, the weakening eye of the day. So that is one deals with the despondence, the sadness, the desolateness of the poet's heart on the end of a century, and it thinks there will be no resurrection or rebirth in the next century. And the symbols, the imagery that he has mentioned is also quite like same that way as he has interpreted. We've gone through the symbols of frosts, of course the coppice, the forest that is cut on and on to stimulate growth. Then we have the weakening eye of the day, that is the end or the twilight of the day. That speaks about the end of the century, that is the 19th century. Now if we get into the second stanza, please let me read out the second stanza for you. The tangled vine stems scored the sky. like strings of broken lyres. So it's a simile out here. So climbing plants that are dead. Why? Because it is winter. Have left behind only their climbing stems or vine stems. They add to the gloominess as the poem compares them to a simile or strings of broken lyre. What is a lyre? It's a musical instrument. So it feels as if the lyres or the strings to music is broken. I've already mentioned to you that Hardy's poems are full of vitality, vivacity, musicality. But sorry, the musicality in this poem, especially the dead music. The music that has no hope, that has no survival, that talks only of death. Because he is filled with the anxiety of what is going to come up in the next century. So the poem is all about that. The comparison is also important in suggesting the lack of music or happiness for that matter. So there is a lack of music. There is a lack of happiness. Every people seem listless and haunting. Let us go to the next two lines. And all mankind that haunted nigh had sought their household fires. So you have to understand that the people seems listless, haunting instead of living their lives. What are they haunted by? They're haunted by the anxiety, the fear of what is going to come up in the next century. Aren't we all scared about our futures? Aren't we all haunted by fear? Why? Whenever it happens because we are not living in the moment. We are anticipating something that is not very hopeful in the future. And for Hardy, as I've told you, with lack of religious faith, with lack of Western cultures coming to an end, with lot of so much unbelief, there comes this question, what are we stepping to? So that is what is happening here. Every people seems listless. They're haunting. They're just living their lives. They're not living for their fun. They're not living it for leaving it. The people are going home and seeking their household fires, add to the image of the gloomy end of the day. There is no vibrancy in the life or color. You have to understand that. Let us get into a detailed analysis into it. The second stanza expands on this idea with a series of metaphors that describes the landscape as embodying the death of the 19th century and its culture. The speaker compares the landscape's sharp features to the century's corpse. We're going to get into these lines. Let us read these lines. The land's sharp features seemed to be the century's corpse outlands. So how is the image coming up to you? It is as if it's a metaphorical image that describes the landscape as embodying the death of the 19th century and its culture. The speaker compares the landscape sharp features to the century's corpse. Since the poem was written in the late 1900s, most scholars take this as a reference to the end of the 19th century. So if we have to just quote a line which shows us that the end, it's this. Century's corpse. The century is dead because it's literally over, but it's also dead in a broader sense. The simile, if you see, the broken lyres, has a relation to this, suggests that the speaker feels that its culture has some way failed. The speaker does not specify the reasons why Western culture has failed, though there are clues in the way the speaker describes the landscape. For example, the speaker begins the poem leaning on a coppice gate. Coppice is a managed forest. It's not a forest that is ungroomed, right? So it's a managed forest. So something that is emphasizing on the domination. And that is why there is a depletion of ideas. The image suggests that human beings have shirked the duty to care for the land, extremely sorry that they use. Since the landscape is a metaphor for the state of Western culture, the implication is thus the people have acted as poor caretakers for Western cultural belief, and thus comes the end of faith. These images can be traced back to the reference to industrialization. Why? The process by which economy shifted from farming to factories. So there was the depletion. The process did significant damage to the English landscape, and it also caused the depopulation of the rural parts of England. As factories took over the work, such as weaving, lace making, that had been traditionally done by rural populations, people left their farms to work in factories. So isn't there a kind of shift from a person's original occupation to something that is so unsettled, so unknown? So if you see into these lines, let me just get into the lines. The land's sharp features seemed to be the century's corpse outlands. His crypt the cloudy canopy, the wind his death lament. The centuries personified as corpse, the harsh winter landscape defining its vested and wan form. The cloudy canopy or the sky covers the century's tomb, the dead century. And the sad wind, what is it adding to? It is a lamentation. It's a song for, not for hope, for death. The ancient pulse of germ and birth was shrunken, hard and dry. So in winter what happens? Everything comes to a standstill. The ancient pulse, see this ancient pulse, something that was known, something that was so familiar, that has been dried up, that is no more. And every spirit upon earth seemed far more less as I. So there comes the subjective element to the poem. So everyone seems to be as haunted as I am. Everyone seems to be without hope. And the scale of his pessimism increases in the stanza. Dull observations escalate to despairing mindset. The poet only sees a world without promise of future. It's a completely bleak world. Now there comes a shift. Till now, what were the images we were seeing? Something that is greyish, something that is the end of the century, something that was a corpse, death lament, broken lyre, haunted, not without the spirit of living. But now comes a shift. Why? Let me read out the lines. At once a voice arose among the bleak twigs overhead. So there is a kind of silver lining to the dark clouds. A joyful song that breaks into the poet's despairing outlook. At once a voice arose among the bleak twigs overhead, in a full-hearted, even song of joy, illimited. It's a full-hearted, even song, prayers sung at the end of the day, that is in the evening. The song was coming out of boundless joy, and the word illimited suggesting something that is uncommon, that is not real, that talks about something that is spiritual. So the first half takes a complete shift in this stanza. The winter landscape that was an extended metaphor for the decay of Western culture, the speaker presents as dead or unsalvageable, is now changed. His viewpoint changes. He bursts into a song of hope, of renewal, because of a singing thrush. It's a symbol for religious faith, devotion, prayer that is sung at the twilight. The speaker thus presents renewed religious faith as a solution to the cultural crises he or she describes in the first half of the poem. The speaker describes the bird that appears in the second half in considerable detail. Let me get into the lines. An edged thrush, frame, knot and small, in blast, beruffled plume, had chosen thus to fling his soul upon the growing gloom. Who was it singing? Who is the person? Who is that persona? Who is that object with so much of hope? It was an old thrush bird. Why this word old? It's feeble. I'm coming to it. It's feeble. It's lean. It's small. Its feathers disarranged by the wind, blast beruffled. Though the thrush's appearance does not arouse any hope, isn't it? It's old. Heedless of the oppressive environment and growing darkness, the mark of struggling to survive in this winter, as if the thrush was making an attempt to survive. Yet the thrush sings. Now this old has a connection to the poet himself, as if the poet can relate himself to the thrush. He is also trying, he is also striving to live at its fullest, but cannot, whereas this thrush is able to. Why? Because its song is so full of hope. The bird puts his soul into the voice as he belts out a happy tune to no one but to the eternal listener. Even song, just see this word. What is an even song? It's a prayer. So the title of the poem suggested that it was all about a thrush, the Darkling Thrush. It took 2.5 stanzas for us to get to the first mention of the bird. But still, the thrush and its song seemed to overcome the initial melancholia of the atmosphere that was brought to the readers. So you see one thing, that the bird appears in the second half and its song is of hope. The bird's song should of course be understood metaphorically, both on its own and in conjunction to that extended metaphor that is already much there in the poem, that is developed and dealt with in the first 2 stanzas. One key detail is that the speaker describes the bird song as a full-hearted even song. Now let me get into what is an even song. As I've told you, it's a prayer song, but actually it's a ritual in the Anglican Church. It is evening prayers, chants and songs. The speaker that describes the bird song is embodying a religious faith, a ritual. And in the next stanza, the speaker calls the hope in the thrush's song blessed. The word blessed, let me read out the lines for you. So it's written that the song is so blessed that it feels like that it is a renewal from the heaven. It is a kind of getting back to the religious rituals and beliefs. And hope itself may be a symbolic here. It's not just any hope. It's a Christian hope. What is a Christian hope for? Resurrection, rebirth. It is life after death. Hope when there is no hope at all. So the poet, who was so melancholic, struck by despair, gets back the hope that is not instilled by his own persona. It is instilled by the thrush. The thrush's appearance in the poem suggests a solution to the cultural decay that the speaker documents in the first half of the poem. Now, so little cause for carolings of such ecstatic sound. So he says that no one else knows what inspires the darkling thrush to sing, because he says there is no cause for such tidings, for such carolings. Was written on terrestrial things, afar or nigh around. Darkling Thrush's song has been compared to Christian carols or Christmas carols. The ecstatic sound of the thrush is in complete contrast to such a hopeless situation, where men are haunted, where the century is dead. The poet cannot think of any earthly event or cause, near or far away, that could be responsible for this. He knows no, because he is filled with so much of hopelessness that he wonders from where the hope of the bird is gathered from. Now the next lines, that I could think they trembled through his happy good night air. The thrush's song feels like an enigma, and the poet marvels, like wonders, at the blessed hope or the knowledge that the bird has. He thinks from where does the bird bring so much of hope? Because it says that I could think they trembled through his happy good night air. The poet marvels at the blessed hope or the knowledge the bird has, and he has not. Some blessed hope. This word blessed that I told you long back. This word blessed talks about the blessedness of the Christian hope, resurrection, life after death, hope after hopelessness. It talks about the Christian faith, the belief in prayer, the belief in something that is going to be good. The Western civilization was losing that because of technology, because of science, because of industrial revolution, because of rural settlements being taken over by factories. So that hope has been brought about by this bird. This ancient song of the bird brings about that hope, which Mr. Hardy was lacking. And this Mr. Hardy is not talking about his own subjective thing. He's talking about a collective identity. Why? Because all men are haunted. All men are listless. So similarly, this song of this bird, even though it is so old, even though it is so feeble, even though it has its wings all disheveled, all disarranged, in blast beruffled plum, yet it promises for a new hope. So you understand that this thrush's song is an enigma. Now the poet ends, some blessed hope. What is that? The poet, being a victim of Western civilization, doesn't know that. So he says, some blessed hope whereof he knew. Who is this he? The bird. He knew about it, and I was unaware. So he completely declares that though there is a connection between the bird trying to survive in this bleak world, yet it has a song to sing. It has a song to influence. But I, who is always haunted by not living at the moment, by being anxious of what is going to happen, does not know that song. And I am unaware of that song. So like the poets, we are also left to wonder. We are also left with that wandering sense of mind. That aren't we all unaware of this song, this eternal song, this eternal prayer? Aren't we all striving for that eternal bliss? Yes, we are. This poem is so relevant. That is why I told Mr. Hardy was the person who coined this modern literature. We all are unaware of that song, that hope. We are all left wondering like Mr. Hardy, and we are all unaware of that hope. We are all striving for that resurrection, for that living once more. But we can't, because we are, according to Mr. Hardy, and if we see the setting of that era, it was a complete messed about feeling as to what to hold on to. You don't have your feet on the ground, yet you do not have your feet on the air. It's a being in between. It's being just somehow getting trapped. So this is what the poem is all about. If you ask me whether it is a pessimism, it is a poem that talks about pessimism, I'm going to tell you yes, of course it is. Because he has more or less talked about death, the corpse of the century. Of course, the lamentation, the cries, the anguish, the agony. But it ends with a note of wondering that there is a hope. We can still find for that hope, but we aren't aware of it. So the strive for knowing what is that hope makes us go on and live for the next day. So it is as if he's trying to tell us that our main task for the next century is going to be to find out what that hope is and to believe into that hope. And if you talk about the title of the poem, The Darkling Thrush, the object of the poem, that is a thrush, is of course old, is of course not in a proper state as it should be, because it is singing a song of such hope, isn't it? But there is this oxymoronic thing in the title. darkling, something that is dark, something that is so bleak. So the bird is a subject of that dark world, trying to strive in the pulse where everything seems to be dead. But you have to understand, darkling thrush, but the thrush is the hope. The song is the hope. The physical beauty doesn't care. It's not cared for. Tries to, like, there is a kind of parallelism created between the thrush and between us. We are also trying to live like that. We are also trying to strive for something. And in the process, we are getting tired, exhausted. But there is the difference, that very difference. That is why it is oxymoronic. What is oxymoronic? There is a difference. Darkling, that is dark, that is bleak. Thrush, that is the hopeful song. As soon as the thrush comes in the poem, what do we get? Hope. So the thrush is the symbol for hope, and not only hope, for renewal. So the title is, of course, a very, very suitable one, because it talks about paradoxes. It talks about how the thrush is also an epitome of this century's corpse, yet not, because it knows how to sing, which we lack it. And as I have told you about the form of the poem, let me just get into the form once more, my dear. The form, the poem is written in iambic meter, and of course it is kind of, there is a kind of alternating between iambic tetrameter and trimeter, right? And if you see more into it, it is written from the perspective of a very, basically a very ancient kind of way of writing a poem. Let me get into it. It is no drama in the structure, and the wordplay in the poem. Okay, though he was subject to that Western civilization, and he could have brought a lot of drama into the poem, but no. Each stanza is an octet, comprises of 8 lines. And another thing, Hardy even coined his own words, which are known as nonce words, Nonce, which are his own words: outlands, blast, be ruffled, spectre grey. And why did he do that? To contribute to the ordered meter or the rhythm of the poem. These words doesn't occur anywhere. Don't occur anywhere else in English language. And for the rhyme scheme, it's A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D. A, B, C, D, C, D. So that's the pattern. And with a very different end rhyme, you have to remember. The other sound divides that are used in the poem are assonance, repetition of similar vowel sounds. Consonants is the consonant sounds and assonance is the vowel sounds. So if you see these lines, at once a voice arose among. O, voice, O, arose, O, among, O. So this is assonance. Now consonants, winter's dregs met desolate. Winter's dregs, D, D for met, and desolate, D. The weakening eye of day, D. So line 4 and 5. And then it comes to this, an aged thrush, frail, so that L, not and small, again that small L. In blust be ruffled plum, blust L, be ruffled L, plum L. So mark this L, 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 L. We have got frail, the last L, small, the 2 L's, blast, that L, be ruffled, that L, plumb, that L. Now next line, chosen thus to fling his soul, fling, that L, and soul, that L, upon the growing gloom, gloom, that L. So lines 24 to 28 deals with assonance. Alliteration next. Repetition of initial consonant sounds. That I could think there trembled through. Line 29. That, T, H. Now again think, T, H. Then there, T, H. Then trembled through, T, H. Then line number 11. His crypt the cloudy canopy. Crypt, C, cloudy, C, canopy, C. So this is what more or less it is. And okay, another thing that I have missed is there is a kind of overlapping between alliteration and consonants in line number 25. Just see there. In blast, be ruffled, plume. Blasts, be ruffled, B. And also that L of ruffled and that plume of that L of plume. I'm repeating once more. Blast, be ruffled. The initial BB, alliteration, and ruffled. That L of ruffled and that plume. That L of plume. So line number 25, it's kind of a overlapping. So let me sum up that this poem talks about hopelessness, yes, sure. Talks about death. Talks about the end of the century. That is what the poem is written in. The end of the century. That is the end of 1900. But also, it talks about a song that we know not, but we strive to know for that. So it's a kind of paradoxical that what are we trying to strive for? It might be there. It is there. But we have not got the search of it. So we are still striving for it. So as I say, I hope this poem was, of course, a treat for you people to understand, to listen, to go through. And of course, please come up with your comments in the comment section for any more thing that we would like to do, and for anything that you have doubts on, or you want to suggest, or you want to discuss. And of course, we will come back with more poems, and we will love literature even the more. Stay happy, stay blessed, love literature, live for hope, and also strive for that song for resurrection. Read in between the lines. Thank you. Stay happy.